We carry these memories not as burdens, but as stories that deserve to be heard.
Out here, the smallest kindness can feel like peace itself. The sun was already sinking when Sergeant James crossed a ridge. Heat shimmered above the sand like a living veil, blurring the outlines of a small Middle Eastern village that stretched below. A scatter of clay houses, crooked power lines, and palms leaning toward the dry riverbed. The air tasted of dust and iron. Somewhere, a donkey brayed. Somewhere else, a child laughed, and the sound startled him with its softness. James slowed his pace. His unit had been patrolling the region for weeks. Routine security, nothing spectacular, but the monotony had grown heavy. Every step carried the same rhythm. Gravel crunch, breath, distant hum of flies. He often wondered if the war itself had become an echo, repeating until men forgot why they'd come. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and descended toward the village. As he entered, the world changed texture. The coarse wind became thick with the scent of bread and smoke. The ground shifted from gravel to packed earth marked by children's feet. Women stood in doorways with covered faces, their eyes sharp yet weary. Men gathered around the well, watching him but saying nothing. James kept his posture calm, nodding respectfully. He'd learned early that dignity mattered here. You couldn't win hearts by towering above them. Then, from between two houses, a small figure darted out. A girl, perhaps 5 years old, in a sun-faded yellow dress. She stopped abruptly, clutching a rag doll, her hair catching the dying light like a halo of dust. James froze. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she lifted one small hand and waved, her eyes wide, brown, impossibly bright. Something broke inside him. A thin shell of weariness cracked open. He couldn't help himself. He smiled back, slowly, deliberately. He came to attention and raised his hand in a crisp salute. The girl giggled. The sound scattered through the air like the flutter of sparrows. Her laugh was so pure that James felt something sting behind his eyes. He lowered his hand, crouching slightly so his voice wouldn't startle her. "Ma'am," he said, his tone formal but gentle, "you're far too young to salute, but thank you for the smile." Her giggle deepened, and she hid behind the doll, peeking out shyly. From the corner of his vision, he saw 2 adults, her parents, he guessed, standing near a doorway. The father's expression was cautious, the mother's unreadable, yet there was gratitude in their gaze. The man approached, stopping a few feet away. "You speak kindly, soldier," he said in halting English. "We don't see much kindness anymore." James inclined his head. "Sometimes it's all we can give." The man nodded, as if understanding carried weight heavier than words. "Her name is Mina," he said, gesturing to the girl. "She likes the soldiers because they make her feel safe." Safe. The word hung between them like a fragile thread. James smiled faintly at Mina, who was now spinning her doll by its arm, humming a tune that seemed older than the desert itself. "Then I'll do my best to keep it that way," he said. He didn't stay long. The patrol route called him forward, but as he walked away, he felt the tug of the moment behind him. The laugh, the wave, the way her eyes had looked straight through fatigue in his soul. That night, while cleaning his weapon by the fire, he found himself staring at the stars instead. The desert sky was endless, and for once it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like possibility. The days blurred together after that. Patrol, checkpoint, dust storm, brief silence, then another patrol. Yet every time they passed a village, Mina would appear. Sometimes she'd be waiting by the road, her small form outlined by sunlight. Sometimes she'd dash out at the last second, waving as if she'd been waiting hours just to see him march by. And James, hardened by years of service, stoic by habit, found himself waving back, always with the same crisp salute. The men in his unit teased him lightly, calling her his little commanding officer, but even they softened when they saw her smile. It became ritual. She'd wave. He'd salute. For a heartbeat, the world would forget it was at war. Weeks later, a sandstorm rolled in from the west. The sky turned the color of brass. The wind screamed like an angry god. The unit took shelter in the old schoolhouse at the village's edge. Through the rattling windows, James could barely see 10 feet ahead. When the storm subsided, The village looked as if it had been erased and redrawn. Dust covered everything: roofs, wells, doorways. Life stirred slowly from the silence. James and his men helped clear debris, repairing fences and roofs. He found Mina and her parents outside their small home, sweeping sand from their doorway. The father, Kareem, offered them water. The mother, Layla, smiled shyly, pressing a piece of flatbread into James's gloved hand. "You help us," she said softly, "so we share what little we have." He took it with both hands, understanding that in this land, small gestures carried the weight of ceremony. "Thank you," he said. Mina tugged at his sleeve. "Soldier, look," she said, pointing to the sky. A flock of doves circled above, cutting white arcs against the gold horizon. "Pretty, huh?" James said. "They always come back," Mina said, matter of fact, then ran to chase their shadows across the sand. Something about her words lingered. They always come back. That night, James dreamed of home, of his younger brother's laughter, of the fields behind his father's house. He hadn't thought of those places in years. The desert had a way of swallowing memories, until kindness unearthed them again. Over the next month, he grew close to the family. When his unit rested near the village, he'd share tea with Kareem, talk about crops and water pumps, listen to Layla's stories about life before the fighting. Mina would sit cross-legged nearby, drawing shapes in the dust with a stick: houses, sons, birds. One evening, she handed him a scrap of paper, a child's drawing of a tall figure in green beside a small girl with yellow hair under a blue sky. "That's you," she said proudly, tapping the figure. "You protect me." James swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'll keep it safe," he said, folding the drawing carefully into his pocket. It stayed there, close to his heart, even on missions far from the village. The change came quietly, as it often does in places where peace is fragile. One morning, as they prepared for a supply run, the radio crackled. Intel about an insurgent cell moving near the valley road, not far from the village. Command ordered a sweep. James's gut tightened. He knew those routes, knew how close the villagers lived to danger they never invited. By midday, the patrol was in motion. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead. Heat waves distorted the landscape into ghostly ripples. Every shadow looked alive. Halfway through the canyon pass, the first explosion ripped the silence apart. The shock wave threw James to the ground. The world became soundless for a moment. Only the high, piercing ring inside his skull remained. When he blinked through the dust, he saw the truck ahead of them engulfed in flame. Shouts. Smoke. A second blast farther down the ridge. The air stank of metal and burning fuel. "Contact left," someone yelled. The words came to him like echoes underwater. He raised his rifle, scanning the rocks, but the enemy was already gone, shadows dissolving into the dunes. When the gunfire stopped, only the wind moved. They spent the rest of the day clearing the road, calling in medevac, wrapping the bodies of 2 fallen men. James worked with mechanical precision, but his thoughts kept drifting to the village beyond the ridge. If the insurgents had come through here, they might have passed close to Kareem's home. That night, while the others slept under broken sky, James sat awake beside the hum of the generator. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Mina's drawing. The edges were smudged now, but the crayon lines still shone. Bright sky, green uniform, yellow dress. Hope caught on paper. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Stay safe, little one." The next morning, they returned to the village. The sun was pale, cold, unkind. As they entered, silence greeted them. Not the usual quiet of dawn, but a heavier stillness, like the air itself held its breath. James saw smoke first. Thin trails curling from the far end of the street. A house had burned. He ran before anyone could stop him. The home was gone. What remained was a skeleton of clay walls and charred wood. His chest tightened as he recognized the doorframe, the shape of the yard. Kareem's house. He found Kareem kneeling amid the ashes, his hands black with soot. His face was hollow, eyes red but dry. When he saw James, he rose unsteadily. "They came in the night," Kareem said. His voice was a rasp. "They said we helped you, that we were traitors." James felt the world tilt. Where's Layla? Where's Mina? Kareem looked toward the wreckage. James followed his gaze, and the silence that followed was the kind that never truly ends. He dropped to his knees. His breath came shallow, the smoke biting his throat. All around, the wind stirred ashes into small whirling ghosts. Kareem placed a hand on his shoulder. "She was not afraid," he whispered. "She said you would come back." James bowed his head, his gloved hand pressing against the ground, against what was left of a home. In the days that followed, he hardly spoke. His unit offered condolences, but words were dust. He helped rebuild what little could be rebuilt, patched walls, fetched water, buried debris. Each night he sat outside the ruins and stared at the stars, waiting for something, a sign, a sound, a reason. He found the doll one evening, half buried near the well. The cloth was singed, one arm missing, but its painted smile had survived. He brushed the dirt away and held it to his chest. After that, he carried it in his pack. Weeks later, orders came to rotate back home. The valley operation was being scaled down. As they prepared to leave, James walked one last time through the village. Children played again near the well. The smell of bread drifted from a new oven. Life, stubborn and small, had returned. Kareem met him by the road. His beard was streaked with gray now, his eyes calm but hollow. "You kept your word," he said quietly. "You kept us safe as you could." James shook his head. "I didn't keep everyone safe." Kareem looked toward the horizon. "No one can, but she believed you would try." He reached into his pocket and handed James a folded scrap of paper. Inside was a new drawing, simple lines, bright colors. Mina again, this time with wings, standing beside the same green soldier beneath the sun. "My wife found it among her things," Kareem said. "She drew it the day before." James couldn't speak. His throat closed. He pressed the paper to his lips, then folded it back with trembling care. "Thank you," he managed to say. Kareem smiled faintly. "You gave her joy. That is a kind of victory." When the convoy finally left the valley, James sat in the back of the transport, watching the desert pass by. The wind lifted dust into spirals that shimmered like spirits. Each gust carried the scent of heat, of distance, of everything he couldn't protect. He reached into his vest and touched two things, the burned doll and the folded drawing. The feel of them steadied him, though they hurt to hold. In the distance, the sun began to rise. The horizon glowed gold, and for a moment the light looked like wings unfurling across the earth. He thought of Mina's laughter, of her words. "They always come back." He whispered them aloud, tasting the dust and the wind. "They always come back." And though the ache inside him would never leave, there was something new there too, a quiet pulse of meaning. Not joy, not peace, but purpose. Because even in loss, kindness survived. Even in ruin, humanity endured. And somewhere in a village that refused to die, a child's drawing fluttered in the wind like a flag of hope, bright, fragile, and forever.